Right. Hello. Right. Let's have a look at some melee. I did a very long video before looking at a bunch of scripting stuff, but it was mostly for ranged enemies. And pretty much as soon as I made the video, the first enemy I tried to make for my own project was a melee guy, and I realised there's some other things to cover. So let's look at melee. This guy that you're about to see, this is just a standard melee enemy. So he is using the default setup. I've literally just imported some sprites and I've set them not to use shooting is false, use projectiles is false. So they're a melee guy. The only changes I've made, he has the smallest radius I think is possible, like 4. You obviously can go lower than that, but it becomes very hard to shoot them. So yeah, he's got a radius of 4, and he's got a slightly slower speed just to make him look a bit better. And then basically what bugs me, right, is like he is so far away, it just doesn't really look like he'd be able to hit me with that little axe from this far away. Like obviously I can move closer. In fact, I'd prefer it if this was the distance that melee enemies came to, but obviously if I run away from him, like that's as close as they get. And I have no reason to go walking myself into his axe swing, so I'm going to stay away. I think that looks kind of, I think the technical term is shit. And so I wanted to try and find a way to make the guy get closer before he tries to hit you with the axe. So this is Goblin Axe, which is kind of like my version of the melee script. And let's just put them side by side, and we'll see if it's going to limp on over. And standard melee guy is going to stop there, and Goblin Axe is going to like come much closer in before he starts hitting me. I think that looks better. So let's look up why this works or how it works. And yeah, so there is no script for standard melee. He's just using the standard melee, and I can't really be bothered to recreate that script in FSM because the problem will be the problem that we get with kind of any FSM that's just using chase and attack and idle, which is that this chase state, even if you set none, it has a predefined in-engine, under-the-hood exit point that once they get within a certain distance, which is that distance that those melee enemies are stopping at, which is far away, it will just leave chase state. And there's not anything you can do about it. It's just going to leave. So the new version, this Goblin Axe script, kind of works a bit like this, right? And this is going to be slurp of tea. A bit talky, but bear with me. So he's got an idle state, and the very first time this script runs, it's going to come into this idle state. Wait, let me rewind. This is using Alpha 60. It would work with any of the newer builds that allow you to have 0 length states. But if you're using one of the itch.io builds, this won't work. You would need to do something similar, but you would need to have like really short frame lengths like this instead of saying 0. But like, give it a go. If you've got a project that you're just starting now, like give that alpha build. Alpha 60, I think, is the latest. It's really good. It actually lets you debug the states in FSMs, which is super handy and makes things a lot easier from when I did even the last video. I will link it in the description. Go check it out. Anyway, so idle. We're going to come into idle state. This is going to be false because we've not set our alerted value yet, so this won't happen. We're going to set those two variables, and then it's just going to be like looping through this, playing the idle animation. So I've got a state called C, so at some point the enemy is going to be able to raycast 2B, and it will pull it out of the idle state into the C state, where it's basically just going to set this alerted variable to 1, and it's going to go back into the idle state. Now obviously alerted is now 1, so instead of running through all of this stuff, it's just going to get to the second line, jump if equals alerted 1, go to deciding. So it won't run any of that, it will jump straight out into this deciding state. And then in the deciding state, it's going to get the distance to the player, and then based on the distance to the player, it's either going to go into chase state or swing state. Not swing state like how you win an American election, not that kind of swing state. More like a state where they swing the axe, because we're not going to use attack state anywhere in this script. As I covered in that last video, attack state again has some stuff under the hood, some things you can't control, and so we're going to use our own attack state, right? We still call attack in here, but we're just not going to call it attack because attack comes with some baggage that it needs to deal with, and we don't want that baggage, so we're going to use swing instead. So we're alerted, it goes to deciding. In the deciding state, we get the distance to the player here, and then let's say you are far enough away, as we are in this example over here. So we are going to go to chase state. In chase state, we've just got, we're basically just going to play this animation. Forget all of this, it's not used. We just loop through the walking towards you animation. And it has no defined exit, but remember from the last video, chase has an under the hood exit from it that is already defined in the engine. But, and I can't fully explain this, but this does seem to be able to exploit that. So what happens is it's going to chase you, and at some point it's going to reach the frame where you have got within a distance at which the kind of engine default leaves chase state and says go back to idle. Now it's going to go to idle for no frames, for 0 time. It's going to come straight into idle, it's going to hit this alerted one again, it's going to go to deciding. You're still going to be outside of the minimum distance, and so it's going to push you all within no frames back into chase state again. And so even though you've just left chase state and gone to idle, it pushes you straight back into chase state and nudges you forward just a tiny amount. And it's going to keep nudging you forward just a tiny amount until you're, it's going to keep going chase, idle, deciding, and then in deciding, it's going to keep pushing it back into chase, and it's like, no, I don't want to chase, I want to go back to idle, because it's annoying, but it keeps getting pushed. It's just going to go pixel and pixel close to the player until finally you are less than or equal to the minimum distance, in which case it will then take you to swing, and swing will start playing, and at the end of every swing, as long as you are not further away, it's going to go back to idle, and then it's going to go back to swing and idle and swing and so on. So you basically cheat the engine a little bit, and that window between where the engine wants to stop you and take you out of chase state and where you want it to actually get to, we're going to like force it to go through those frames until it gets there. I think that's how it works, but the only way to get it to work, let me show you. It's only working because of this 0 length frames, right? If I put a first frame into idle that has some length, let's put 0.3, and I run this again, let me just take out the standard melee guy and just leave my guy. If I change this so that idle actually has frame length, he's going to walk forwards. That chase state is going to leave chase, it gets forced back into idle, and because that idle has a little bit of length to it, he's going to stop at that like annoyingly distant way away from you. If we go back in and we take this out, so it has 0 length, it's almost like the idle at this point does not get a chance to trigger the thing that stops you before it gets pushed back into chase again. So just removing that line, and we'll start this again, and we'll run it. You'll see that now he will move all the way in. And you can see there's a little tiny jiggle where he kind of like, he like statters up to you before he hits you with the axe. I don't think there's really a lot of ways you could fix that, because you need it to go back into idle, and you'd then, if you wanted to hide it, you'd have to like take that first melee frame and make it look like the idle frame. And so, yeah, there is that tiny little bit of jank, and also there's a tiny little bit of push where he pushes you. There's probably some finessing I could do with the radius of the player and the radius of this guy. It works perfectly if you set his radius to 0, but then you can't shoot him. But as a workaround, as a way of getting melee enemies to get a little bit closer in and have a little bit kind of like more impact when they're going for you, I think it works quite nicely. And kind of, it does annoy me that I can't quite explain why this loop, forcing it through this loop between chase, idle, deciding, and back to chase again, and using the 0 length frames to do it. I can't quite explain why that works. I've like stumbled on it by accident, but it does work. And if I don't have a 0 length frame, or if I put a frame that does have length into idle, then it stops working. So I'm pretty sure that's what's making this work, but I can't tell you exactly why. And, you know, I don't have access to the source. But this is effective, and you can use it to make enemies that are going to get closer up to you. I will link in the description to the Alpha 60 build if you're interested to check that out. It's got a whole bunch of features. There is a what do you call it? An update log on the same site that you can read to see all the stuff that has changed. And I will link this script somewhere as well if you're interested in checking it out and having slightly punchier enemies. Thanks for your ears and have a nice day. Goodbye.